So I will get us started by saying, hi, Ryan, thanks for joining me.
Hey, thanks for having me, Scott. Good to be here.
I did a little tiny introduction just a second ago, but why don't you actually tell people in, a couple sentences or so your story so they can put you in context?
Yeah, my story is, I came out of, I'll start ancient history. I came out of university wondering what I was going to do with my life and sort of interested in both like art sides of things and more scientific sides of things, creativity and rigor. And in some sort of way, I got drawn into search engine marketing in those early days. I felt like it blended this idea of kind of rigorous. You get all this great data and you can optimize and think about algorithms, but you also have to think about the human behind this, what motivates them, what drives their desires. And so that was my entryway into the world of marketing, trying to merge that art and science. I still kind of think about marketing as that's the endeavor, merge the art and the science. From search engine marketing, ended up going through agencies and just building my marketing toolkit. Eventually wanted to move in-house to tech company. Tech marketing was really what motivated me. So I jumped into Microsoft and helped them with their digital transformation. From there, I really just wanted to get closer to products. So moved over to Facebook, was able to build out their partner ecosystem and help a lot of SMBs build solutions on top of the Facebook tech stack. And then just continuing my journey closer to product, I moved over as a product marketing director at Coinbase to build out their Web3 product marketing organization. So kind of diverse, well-rounded set of marketing experiences there from agency and campaign work down to product work.
What an amazing adventure. And we've had the privilege of partnering with you twice in your Facebook days and in your Coinbase days. And so really a big thanks for joining me for today's discussion. As in your past roles, thinking about creative execution, how to get more done, how to get work executed strategically, and then how to manage that process really makes you a great voice in today's conversation. The biggest thing that's going on right now is it's just a different year, right? This is a year of great change, particularly within the tech sector. And so I think we're in a period of rebuilding now. We're going to be moving into a period of stabilization, but it will be a new landscape where there are tighter budgets, modified goals, and more projects than people to tackle them. Been wide-scale reduced workforces. There have been focused objectives, and that leads to shifting work streams and team transitions. In other words, 2023 is a big year of change for all of us. Change means learning. It means new strategies. It means rethinking your execution, your work streams, and what you're doing. But one thing that never goes away is really control and flexibility over what you're executing, right? So meeting project demand without losing visibility so that you can get through project bottlenecks, you can get through aggressive goals, you can get through tighter deadlines. When you and I were talking about this sort of in the pre-session, one of your comments is aggressive goals never disappear, right? They are part of the growth team landscape. What are you seeing different in the marketplace right now as companies kind of cope with restructuring and cope with more market pressures, a higher inflation rate, higher interest rate environment?
Well, one of the things that I see and my limited purview and then suspect is happening kind of outside of the scope of my vision is that some people are struggling to accept the new reality. I think it's very hard to operate if you don't accept reality. And I don't mean, accepting reality sounds like that could be about kind of like giving up or being unambitious or whatever, but it really just means that there are some ground conditions and you have to navigate around them. And so, I think the companies that are going to move the fastest are the ones that accept the reality the quickest. So you think about last year, it was very clear, the writing was on the wall, that there were economic headwinds that were current and that they weren't going to go away anytime soon. And a lot of companies wanted to drag their heels in terms of making reductions and course corrections. They wanted to kind of use hope as a strategy. Let's hope this blows over. Let's hope there's not a recession. Let's hope that things change and we don't have to change because other things will sort of course correct on their own, right? Hope is not a viable strategy. The companies that position themselves best for the future were the ones who accepted the reality and acted accordingly. So I think a lot of companies made aggressive drawdowns in terms of their resources last year. And now they're thinking about, how to get back to being, proactive. One of the things that I mentioned in our pre-conversation is I hate the phrase. I absolutely hate the phrase "do more with less." Because if you could do more with less, you would always do more with less. It's sort of, if we can suddenly do more with less, then we were just being inefficient and ineffective in the past, right? So I like to position it instead as be more, achieve more with less. I think achieve more with less is a better phrasing than do more with less, because sometimes actions are empty. So you accept the reality, you accept the new conditions, you think about what you actually need to achieve, and then you find the way to achieve that with the reduced resources. Trying to have unrealistic goals is not motivating, it's demoralizing, and I think it blunts your impact.
I love that thought, right? Find a way to achieve more with more flexibility as your goals are changing, as your resources are changing. Really leans into this idea of, how do you navigate a reorganization? And we've got some resources for anyone who's sort of watching this that's in the middle of a reorganization or trying to figure out how to navigate the reorganization. But really, it's about figuring out a scalable resource model. It's about understanding your cost base, getting some predictable and utilized resources in place, right? Because when things are changing, suddenly some projects will stop, some teams won't exist, some teams will be overwhelmed, some projects will be prioritized. And most importantly, it's about more collaboration and more workload management so that you can get there, because you're right, and then carry that forward. Like that should really be the new normal, not just for 2023, but that should have been the normal be in 22, 21, and 20 as things were growing out of control. And definitely 24, 25, 26 as organizations are tasked to deliver stronger results. And in the resourcing model, which is really where we focus on helping clients, every in-house marketer has a blend of resources they play with. So particularly as you're smaller and growing, you lean into contractors and freelancers. You build out your in-house team. And if we watch over the past 24, 36 months, that's where the huge build came. The challenge with contractors and freelancers is it becomes harder to manage as they grow. It's fine to work with 2 or 3 freelancers. If suddenly you're working with a team of a half dozen, 20, 30 different contractors and freelancers, coordinating all of those elements becomes tricky. People often move to an in-house model, an in-house creative studio model, which can be great, but it also has a little bit, it often is under-resourced, over-demanded, but it also has in-house people have other organizational needs that they need to deliver again. So they'll have training, they'll have HR policy meetings, they'll have team events, they'll have organization-wide events. And so the agency model, which is like 100 years old now, has actually morphed into really resourcing on demand. And as an in-house marketer, what you're doing is you're balancing those resources. How do you choose, in your experience, which of these models to lean into when?
I think your resourcing, just like organizations and companies, are a reflection of the problems that you need to be solving. So I think you always have to start with that question of what problem am I solving? What am I optimizing my energy towards, right? So, if, for example, I won't give you a hypothetical, I'll give you a real world example, which is my time at Microsoft, right? Microsoft was going through this digital transformation. They historically had just done brand ads, run big TV campaigns, pay for a Beatles song, and then let the retailers sell the product, right? They didn't have a direct relationship to the customer. Now, in the post-Windows world, where they're going more towards selling directly to consumers and a kind of web-based interoperable model, they needed to figure out ways to develop relationships with the consumer. So that's the problem to be solved, and the resources needed to reflect that. So they're going to obviously ramp up the resourcing that they have on things like data management platforms or performance marketing. So they're going to bring in, and being Microsoft and having billion-dollar budgets, they needed large agencies that could solve that problem. So that's a reflection of what they needed, right? Intensive resource allocation towards like owning relationships with customers, getting better at that, doing digital, doing it at scale globally for massive campaigns. If I think about my time at Coinbase, the problem I was trying to solve was, we're shipping in a year, maybe my team is shipping 100 new products or features, 100 new products or features. That's not something that you can funnel through a large scale agency model. You need some sort of contract or freelance embedded like model where it's just, point you in the direction and you go. Like you've got, like, there's no time for project management or oversight. It's like you need to like get the mandate and deliver the product within a couple of days, 1 to 2 days max. So I think you start with the problem and you build the resourcing based on that. If I can say one more thing, we had this debate recently about fast, cheap, good, and I don't like using the word good because good implies that if you're fast and cheap, it's got to be bad. I think it's just really you can optimize for fast, cheap, and maybe not super integrated, maybe not like really high production value. You can still be very, very good at solving your problem. And I think when I look at these, I also think about that fast, cheap, good model. It's like, do I need fast and cheap and just not like high quality breakthrough creative, but just getting the message out there? Or do I need high quality breakthrough creative? Those are going to lead to different models as well.
One of the things I like about your thinking so much, and I want people to take away from our conversation today, is that you're rooting your decisions more strategically, right? You're saying, where are we? So let's understand where we are today. Let's understand what's the problem or what's the need that we're solving. And then ultimately, what's the data that contributes to us understanding how we're solving that? Creative resourcing, has been very much art over science in many ways, because the in-house agency team has often come up through agency ranks where creativity is the measure of success, not the operation side, not the operation side of creative operations, but the creativity side. But you really need to be able to marry both, which is both excellence on the creative side, but also excellence on the operation side. And that takes data, it takes understanding priorities, setting the strategy, formulating the problem, and it states a real clear-eyed view about where you are, and a strong voice as you echo internally what the real resource needs will be. When I look at our account team, and they really play a strategic function with marketers, helping them understand their resource needs, those are the areas that we're guiding clients the most. We're actually not telling client what's the best execution, what's the best creative platform, what's the best ad platform. We're really saying, what's the right combination of embedded contingent workers, studio projects on demand, studio projects at a certain amount every month, freelancers, and then how do you integrate that workflow with your internal team? So rooting it in data, I think, is something that everybody should take away. The 4 questions that we ask when we say understand the problem from a resourcing recommendation perspective are these 4, right? What is the work? How much work is there? How fast does that work need to be done? In your Coinbase experience, in that Coinbase world, you were shipping so much over the course of a month or a quarter. It was, how do we get all of this done at an acceptable quality to meet the market demand, even if we break a few things along the way? The skills required to do the work, and a real clear-eyed view. It's really easy to lean in. We need the highest level of expertise to execute all of this because that feels safest. But in practice, it isn't the safest. You actually want the right skill set at the right level of seniority to get that work done. So everybody's engaged and motivated in the work. You don't want a world-class creative director sort of polishing up sales collateral because they just won't deliver in the right way. But you get the right art director on sales collateral and suddenly, boom, your sales teams will be loving it. And then the fourth question that we ask is, what's the level of collaboration that's going to need? Is this work that we can just, as you said, push it out to a team, a rough outline of what's needed. I need 100 of image selected that meet this parameter and turn them around in the next 24 hours versus a level of collaboration that works with internal stakeholders to take their feedback and refine messaging so that the sales teams are comfortable with it. So if you out there listening to this webinar are thinking through, how do I think through rebalancing my resourcing as we go forward? And it might be monthly, quarterly. You're not going to be planning yearly right now because there's too much change in the marketplace. These are the 4 questions I would start with. And it really leans off of what Ryan was just saying. Oops, sorry. I feel
if I could interrupt there. One thing that you said that I love is, like, you know, you might put this world-class creative director on some sort of minor project and it's not like the right resource allocation. It made me think about something that I've said before it may be controversial, right? Maybe a little bit controversial. And that is embracing the idea of good enough. Now, saying good enough just feels like, it never feels good to say good enough, right? And it's very easy to open yourself up to critique if you say something is good enough. It's like, oh, you're lazy. You're just not, you're not willing to put in the sweat and the elbow grease to make this thing perfect. But I think we all, like, let's just be honest, we know perfection is an unattainable goal. And there's some point where the margin of return, like the impact, the outcome that you drive by continuing to sweat the quality of something, just diminishes or even becomes negative. You're putting in more work and more energy into this thing that is going to return in terms of impact on your business or benefit to your business. And that's the point where you want to say, this is good enough. Like, margins of return here are diminishing or they've gone negative. Like, you know, either you have to accept that we've gotten to that place, and that's a resource efficiency question, right? So good enough is not, it's not giving up. It's not being lazy. It's not failing. It's making a smart decision about resource allocation and the outcome that you're driving by continuing to invest in something.
Well, absolutely. And it's really about understanding your priorities and balancing those priorities. And the key to doing that successfully is better data, right? Understanding your burn rates on a weekly basis so you can understand your efficiency, how you're using your resources, and then understanding the project mix, the kind of work that's coming through, and how it might change month to month or quarter to quarter, and then balancing the resources that are available and matching all of that to more flexibility. You know, the challenge with full-time hires is that's the team you've got for the next 12, 18, 24 months. And so it really molds the kind of projects that you can take through from an executional perspective. And so right now, increased flexibility means, well, actually, most of our clients are planning quarterly. They're not planning on 12-month cycles. They're really looking at, what do we need to get done in the next 3 months, and even executionally, really what's ahead of us this week or this month. Data will allow you to tell the story of quality, time, and sorry, why did I blank on the third leg of our stool? So we've got a good enough, we've got how fast it goes, and then budget. And really, creative operations is about managing all of those 3. And instead of saying good enough and getting into the debate about creative quality, you want to be leaning people towards the throughput, the success of those projects, the results of those projects, and how your resource base is being used.
These are subjective, like ROI.
That's right. You take the subjectivity out of it a little bit, and you actually say the reason that we're putting these projects through so quickly is the demands of our team and the demands of the market. And so, yes, we could do increased rounds of creative evaluation or more collaboration across the organization or more engagement from management in our decisions, but then we're going to have to slow down throughput, or we're going to need to add to the number of resources that we have in place. And so we're balanced. Yes, it's always going to be a balance. Here's the data that's supporting that balance. And more importantly, here's my forecast for next quarter on what the balance is going to need to be to support what we see coming down through the pipeline. And so our best clients right now are tracking their burn weekly. They're doing quarterly business reviews where they're really projecting out into the next couple of quarters what their resourcing needs will be. And they're rebalancing their resourcing mix quarter to quarter instead of on 12-month periods of time. And they're using these 4 questions to sort of get there, but they're also leaning into flexible resourcing, more efficient spend, and deeper partnerships with their vendors. There's a lot of time that sits inefficiently used both internally and externally. And so one of the areas that we're helping guide our clients to right now is, how do we make the most out of the budget that you've got by improving workflow and improving project visibility? And the key area there, and I think a recommendation in a changing environment, is don't cut your production, right? The project management or producer that really manages workflow for you will actually help you make better use of your spend than creatives managing their own time. It's a truism that creatives are divergent thinkers, that we love chasing the new idea. And that's one of the beauties of having creative working directly with your marketing teams in an in-house studio model or in an agency model. But you need to be able to keep the focus on those strategic priorities. And one of those becomes the producer investment, the production investment that you put in place. You can scale your marketing operations up, you can scale your marketing operations down, but the real win will come in the flexibility that you're bringing in place, the way that you're maximizing what you've got, and the depth of the partnership that you're putting in place. When a company's shrinking, what happens to your your planning cycle? Like, when you're thinking, okay, cuts are coming, I'm going to have to not do more with less, because we talked about that before, but try to find some efficiencies. What happens to your planning cycle internally? How does it shift?
Well, I think planning, one of the truisms of planning is that it requires like some amount of stability. You can only plan for things that are predictable. Any amount of planning when there's an incredible amount of instability, volatility, unpredictability, all these things, it can be a fool's errand. And I think that's another one of those realities that people need to face up to, right? If you're doing planning based on projections that are just, are arbitrary, or could, or if you look back historically at your projections and say, hey, we did our planning based on these projections and we were off by 700%, right? What was the point of planning, right? Or at least on that time cycle. So, I think people need to think about, rethink planning based on that. Is there more of a, in Coinbase, we were almost shifting towards like a model of like real-time resource reallocation, because the market was shifting so quickly. So I think, I think that's super challenging from the marketing point of view. But what we tried to do is pin down like what minimums were, like what's a minimum spend going to look like that's guaranteed. Because if you plan for, if you don't have like a base case to plan for, you're sort of, completely destabilized. So I think you set that foundation of a base case, but then you're almost doing planning as like a real time, like reevaluation.
Love it.
So
that's right.
And then real-time reevaluation.
It becomes real time, and it requires more flexibility because you can't use a lot of historicals to gauge where you're going. So you can just peer down the funnel what's coming at you, right? And we go back a year ago. In fact, the challenge working with the Coinbase team was an execution bottleneck. We had too much work, not enough capacity to get them done. And so it was really about adding horsepower into the mix. And that's why Brainrider was just such a lovely fit with the Coinbase team 12 months ago. Suddenly, the market turns on its head and we're going down. No one planned for it. I think Coinbase is like a brilliant case study in what you were just talking about, right? Which is planning in a face of too much uncertainty just becomes almost impossible. And so you really need flexibility to get there, where you reduce and prioritize if that's the call, or you increase and expand if that's the call. And the startup world is both, always. Every startup company, every growth company I've ever worked for takes 2 steps forward and then 1 step back. But what's the stress like internally when you're dealing with this? Is the stress of the bottleneck?
What's the stress like? I think one of the, we could talk probably for an hour about that, what the stress is like, but I think one of the biggest stresses is that you're expected to be, articulate and have a framework for something that's incredibly disruptive, right? Which is the nature of disruptions is, things are changing, but you don't know what the outcome is going to be. If you knew what the outcome was going to be, you'd buy that lottery ticket and you'd kind of, you'd win, right? So I think that there is this stress that we need to remove that stress and say we're all muddling through this kind of uncertainty and need to kind of recognize that and have like healthy debates about it, as opposed to expecting somebody to know like what the answer is. I just recently read this book that it's a quick read. Seems kind of old school, but it's Only the Paranoid Survive. It's Andy Grove talking about Intel, talking about how you go through these strategic inflection points. And one of the points he makes in there that I think is a good way to reduce stress is he recognizes that at these strategic inflection points, oftentimes the actors on the fringes, like the people that are in the trenches, actually have more insight and more information about how change is happening than the people that are in the center. So I think one of the ways that you can manage through these disruptive moments is you can push more of the decision making out to intelligent actors at the fringe of the organization. So this is actually a value that agencies like yourself can kind of offer, is like, give you the insight and the autonomy to sort of act on your own based on your own localized intelligence, rather than forcing everything to come back to some sort of centralized planning. I think that's a good stress reduction and accelerant.
I love that thought. Yeah, I mean, you've lived through this, right? So your experience is really germane to it. And so, who you partner with and the depth of those partnerships and the flexibility of those partnerships makes a big difference. And there are all sorts of areas of what you're executing that you can outsource, digital design, content, strategy, planning, production. All of those pieces in combination can give you the flexibility. The stress is going to be there. The change is going to be there. The decisions that you're able to make can help you manage that. We got a question that popped in, and we're coming close to the tail end of the webinar anyway. So let me open it up for questions. And let me pop this one up here. It says, curious what Ryan thinks the in-house creative resourcing will look like in 2023 and beyond. Has the last 12 months changed how high growth companies need to think about marketing and creative execution? What a great question.
Well, I think for a lot of companies it has, just because it's an expensive model to build out initially, and people are going to be more resource constrained, and people are going, the winds are very clearly pushing us towards like cost reduction and lean internal resourcing, right? That's clearly where the winds are blowing us. But long term, I think when the market normalizes a little bit and there isn't this like rapid, like kind of whip type reaction. I mean, it's a whip reaction, right? Like people overstaffed, they added too many resources, they got too kind of like fat and inefficient. And now the whip kind of is, the tail of the whip is kind of coming through. And now we're kind of reacting, going the other way. We're going to probably go too lean, right? And we're going to figure out how lean we actually can operate internally. So I'd say like, certainly over the next, 18 to 24 months, it's going to be fairly hard for companies to make a claim that they'd be better off investing in these internal resources than having a scalable external model. Now, I think long-term, people should be making very smart decisions about like, are the problems that they're solving actually better served by an internal agency, right? Don't take a recipe and say, a lot of people that took this recipe and said, Google did this and it was super successful. And it's like, right, but that was like, that worked with their business and the problems that they were trying to solve. Does an internal model solve your problems in the most effective, most efficient way? I think that would be the question to answer. And you should have to make a business case for it, not just point to somebody else doing it successfully and say, we should do it because they did it and they were successful, right? Why is the right recipe for you?
That goes back to your overall message. Understand where you are, understand what's important, where your priorities lie, what your strategy is, lean into your data to help you make decisions, and then support them with a business case. It's totally sophisticated, creative operations approach, but it's also a smart marketer's approach. We got one more question. I'm going to take us just a little bit long. If you can give us a couple more minutes. What criteria should be used to evaluate, identify agency partners in a model like you're describing? And I can help with that one a little bit. So let me see.
You read it really fast. So like when
what? Yeah, I know, because I'm running out of time. What criteria should be used to evaluate or identify the right agency partners in a model that you're describing that's flexible? And let me go, and then you can chime in because I've been putting you on the hot seat.
Yeah,
I actually think part of it is how flexible is your agency partner model. We know that the business environment right now means that it's going to be hard to predict what's coming at you. And so, an old school traditional agency 12-month long retainer is just not going to give you the flexibility that you need any more than internal hires are going to be. So you're going to want to look at people who are providing weekly burn reports, quarterly business reviews, quarterly resource reallocations, helping you plan out, support those resource recommendations using business cases. So that's one. And deeper level of partnership, that workflow management that allows contingent worker or embedded style agencies, team members to be part of your team. If it's quick turnaround and completely integrated work, studio work that's in place that can be either pre-booked studio time or ad hoc studio time, because as you said, you don't know what's coming at you. But at the end of the day, you're looking for an agency whose mission is to help you execute at scale on a flexible basis, whatever that scale is. So those would be some of the things that we modeled Brainrider around, and we're doing it to react to client needs. When you look for a partner to partner with, what are some of the things you're looking for?
Yeah, this is not a framework that you can just apply across the board to every agency resourcing question. But there are two things that I'll mention that I've seen as points of failure in the past. One point of failure is around like ramp up and subject matter expertise. I find that at times, and I've been on the agency side, I've done business pitches, right? You're going to say yes. As an agency, you're going to say yes. Can you do this? Yes, we can. Yes, we can. Do you know everything you need to know about fintech or crypto? We've got it. We've got the subject matter expertise. We can do it. Your job is not to go in there and say, well, maybe we're not the right agency for you, right? But I think that there are times where people select agencies and they don't maybe have the right subject matter expertise. They don't recognize that, with Coinbase, one of the challenges is that the industry is changing so rapidly, so fast. Staying up to pace, up to date on the industry and knowing the ins and outs and being able to write about DeFi or any kind of decentralization or the NFT ecosystem, you have to do the homework. And so you need to know, is this agency able to keep up on that? Or are we going to constantly feel like we're in this education model? So you might want to hire an agency that has that deep subject matter expertise. That's one place that I think people fail. And I know we're out of time, so I'll try to make this quick. The other one is be really realistic about your costs, right? There is an element of you get what you pay for. And I saw this at Microsoft, right? Microsoft had all this leverage to negotiate really favorable contracts. And the win for them was to negotiate every time they went to a new agency, a smaller fee. But no one ever sat back and said, is it reasonable to expect that an agency can actually do the work that we want them to do and need them to do at the quality we need them to do it at for the money we're paying them, right? Is that actually realistic? And it became very clear that we were like negotiating these agencies into a corner where they could not succeed. So I think you also need to be very fair and honest about your relationships if you want them to be profitable, longer term partnerships, rather than just exploitative, mercenary economic situations that are super extractive. So those are two things that where people fail: subject matter expertise, being honest about that, and like get what you pay for. Right?
Yeah.
Is this reasonable for them to do the work you need them to do?
Right. Find the efficiencies through working better as opposed to working cheaper. I love that. And then make sure you find someone who knows how to get the work done, understands the work that you need. And I'm going to wrap this up on, I mean, that's that. I couldn't have asked you to sort of encapsulate our relationship when we work together better. I mean, that's really, Brainrider's not always about saying yes. We actually do try to say no because we fit a very specific client use case, which is I'm trying to scale my creative resourcing to get more done with the right efficiency and workflows. You've been a brilliant partner at 2 different organizations with us over that. And it's really easy to tell why. You brought tons of insight into the conversation today. I hope that the audience appreciates how open you are and how thoughtful you are as you think through all of those elements. I've enjoyed our conversations a ton. If anybody has any additional questions, let me know or post them in the Q&A or just follow up with our team directly, and Ryan and I will get there. The Brainrider team is sort of sharing resources to help our clients and in-house creative operations and in-house marketers really navigate this incredible changing circumstance. Like Ryan, I'm optimistic that we're actually going to go back into a bit of a growth phase, that the turbulence will settle down, people will right size, and everybody will get back to doing amazing marketing that's sort of helping change the world. But in the meantime, I'll say thanks for joining us, Ryan. Thanks for joining us to everybody who was on the webinar today. Reach out if you have any questions, and reach out if you want to connect with Ryan. He's an awesome marketer. You can learn lots from him. Thanks.
Thank you, Scott. Cheers.